Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Leon Bibb from Channel 5. Leon, welcome to the Ray Carr Show.
Oh, good to be here, Ray. Thank you so much for having me on.
Leon, when did your career actually start here at Channel 5?
I started Channel 5 in May of 1995. Okay. Before that, I was at Channel 3. I had started at Channel 3 in 1979.
Being one of the greatest broadcasters the city of Cleveland has ever seen, what was your first job in broadcasting?
First job in broadcasting, I guess I was in college at Bowling Green State University, and I went on, I was a radio newscaster.
Oh.
And I did that in college, but my first professional job in broadcasting was at Bowling Green in graduate school when I was the news director and part-time anchorman for the college newscast. Well, it wasn't a college newscast. We just did regular news, but it was at the PBS station. And I stayed there for a couple of years doing graduate work, and then I went on to the CBS station in Toledo as a reporter.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a newscaster, because you do it with such natural flair? It's so professional. Is it something that you just said, hey, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life?
Yeah. Sixth grade, I decided.
Really?
I was in the sixth grade at Miles Standish Elementary School, and I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And my sixth grade teacher, Robert Taylor, encouraged me to write the graduation play for the sixth grade as we were going to junior high school. So I wrote the graduation play. It took several weeks to do it. He helped me a great deal. And on the day of the play, when all the people applauded and everybody loved what we had done, and I had a supporting role in the play. I wasn't the star, but I was like supporting.
But you wrote it.
Yeah, but I wrote it. I wrote the whole thing with his help a little bit. He says, "Son, you have a gift. It is a God-given gift," said Mr. Robert Taylor. And if I were you, I would think about a career in journalism or in playwriting, because you have a gift for words and putting words together. And that was the moment. I mean, I don't mean that was the year or the month. That was the precise moment that changed my life.
And that was in sixth grade?
Sixth grade, yeah.
Wow. And then you went on to graduate from Glenville High School. Then you went to Bowling Green State University, as we mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And what was the biggest thing you learned in college to prepare you for what you're doing now?
We asked our professor, Dr. Jeff Clark, who was one of my favorite professors of all time in undergraduate school, and we asked him, what are the most important subjects we should take? And he said, of course you're studying journalism. We're going to teach all about journalism, but the most important subjects for you to take are all of them, because as journalists, you're going to be covering everything. You'll have to know a little bit about music, about geography, about Beethoven, about Brazil. You'll have to know a little bit of history, political science. You'll have to know a little bit about everything. So everything you cover, you're going to use somewhere along the line. Everything you study.
Who was the first person you ever interviewed as a journalist?
Well, I was at the Plain Dealer for about a year before I got into broadcasting. After I got out of undergraduate school. God, I can't remember the first. I know I did a story on some crooked real estate developers.
Okay.
and here in Cleveland.
Okay.
And I remember doing a story on that. I guess my first television, that was for the Plain Dealer newspaper.
Okay, right.
My first television news story was about a school in Toledo was getting ready for Easter, and they had an Easter bunny visit the elementary school.
Fluff story.
Yeah, fluff story. It was a fluff story. Yeah.
Back in the time when you started in journalism, you think about the time back in sixth grade and the subsequent times afterwards. Cleveland was in a different place than it is now. Can you talk about the times when you first started and how Cleveland's evolved into where they're at today?
Well, I grew up in the city. The city had, when I was growing up in the 1950s, 1960s, I guess the city had more than 800,000 people, approaching 900,000 people at that time. I lived in the city. And I rarely got into the suburbs. I mean, we would have Sunday drives through the suburbs. My father would drive the car, and my mother, and with my sister and me. So I saw a big change. A lot of people left the city and moved to the suburbs. But when I was growing up, everything that I needed in life was in the city. I played Little League Baseball. It was city sponsored. I was in a Boy Scout troop. in the city. I never feared for my life in the city. I never heard a gunshot in the city, unless it was New Year's Eve and people celebrating by shooting into the air. But I never knew of anybody who got shot. I never knew of anybody who knew of somebody who got shot. That's one of the big changes that I've seen in the last many decades.
And do you think that has a lot to do with the family structure? Is when I grew up and when you grew up, things were a little bit tighter knit at home?
I think so. I mean, I can go down on the street where I lived. I lived on Parkgate Avenue, which is in the Glenville neighborhood, right off East 105th Street. I'm over there all the time. In fact, I was with a friend of mine the other day. He and I have known each other since before kindergarten.
Wow.
We go back to the age of 3. We grew up together. I could go down the street and I could tell you who lived in every house on our block for, it might have been 20 houses. I could tell you who lived in there. I could tell you the kid who lived there, my age or thereabouts. I could tell you their parents' name, and I could tell you where each kid's father worked. All my friends.
My goodness, it's not that way today, unfortunately.
No, it's not that way today, sadly.
You still enjoy doing journalism in the world that we live in now?
I do. They count on me, I think, around here to do a lot of different kinds of things here at Channel 5, and I enjoy the job of gathering the news and trying to make some sense out of it. And oftentimes I will get an assignment where I'm asked to give it a Leon Bibb perspective. That's what we call them. Leon, give us an
editorial.
It's kind of a commentary, light commentary, or deeper analysis. Yesterday I did a piece on the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they fired the coach and they fired the general manager, and the Browns concluded the season at 3-13. Leon, what's it all mean? Where do we go now? What are we feeling? What's the city feeling? So I wrote a piece and produced a piece, and we got interviews that we needed to get of man on the street. And
what do you feel?
I just feel that I thought it was our turn to win, but I found out that in the NFL you don't take turns winning championships. So I'm just feeling. I go back to the drive. I was there in the drive in January 1987. I saw it live from the upper deck. My good friend Otis Howard and I were there. I remember the '64 Browns and all of that, and I'm just feeling it's just we want a winner. And so I'll do a piece like that, or I may do a piece on what's it all mean with the Republican National Convention coming here. What's it all mean? And I says, well, that means that we are bouncing back, that we are doing a better job than we were doing. I don't think the Republicans spend a lot of money to come to a town that isn't going to be able to lay out the red carpet for them. So I'm glad that a political party of a national scope is coming here. That means that we are moving in a better direction, in the right direction.
The one thing I would like to see Cleveland do is the area by the stadiums, and redevelop the land by Lake Erie.
Yeah, I think we should. I know we're going to hold on to Burke Lakefront Airport. That's been a controversial piece. By the way, I worked at Burke Lakefront Airport the summer of after my freshman year and the summer after my sophomore year in college. I worked at Burke Lakefront Airport.
What'd you do?
Planting grass and washing trucks and doing whatever the regular full-time guys did not want to do. Right. It was a bunch of kids, college kids and high school kids, and we all worked together. And they gave us assignments every day. But all that grass between the runway and the taxiway for about a mile out, we helped plant that grass. So when I go over there and look at that, I say, well, that's my lawn. I put all that grass in there.
Now we know.
Yeah.
So you're also an actor. You write poetry. Talk about your acting career.
Well, I'd love to do more of it. I've done some plays. I've done several plays. In fact, I just shot a scene for an independent movie. I'm playing myself in the movie. Okay. We just shot that last week, and I just had to do what I do for a living and do a stand-up and report on a piece of fiction, a crime drama, and report on it from the Justice Center. So that's coming out. I did a film a couple of years ago called Made in Cleveland, where I had kind of a starring role in this play, playing the father of a Marine who had been killed in the war in Afghanistan. A few years ago, I did the Ensemble Theater. I did Same Time Next Year, It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's a 2-hour play. It's only 2 people in the play, and I'm on stage for 2 hours.
That's a lot.
Covering a 26-year period. Dee Perry of Idea Stream Radio. She was the co-anchor. I mean the co-anchor. She was the co-star. And it's the 2 of us on stage, and we cover about a 26-year period. And then I did another little thing that we were talking about just before we started this interview, a little thing called Love Letters, which is another play about a romantic interest.
Just people reading letters throughout the years.
Yeah, throughout the years. You actually read that. And I've done some stage presentations where I did a soldier's play where I played the bad guy in a soldier's play, and that was a stage reading where we actually read the script, but we moved around and there was movement on stage, but I played the bad guy, Sergeant Vernon Waters.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, so I enjoy doing that, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that as I get older and as I eventually leave this business, whenever that happens.
Well, you'll be here a long time, Leon. You're a legend in Cleveland, and you're in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame too.
Yeah, they honor me by putting my name in there, and I'm appreciative of that. If you can just hang on in this business, that's a lot of it in local television. If you can hang on, I have never been fired, and a lot of people are fired in this business. Not that they've done anything wrong, but sometimes management comes in and decides they want to go in a different direction, and they release you at the end of a contract. I've never been released at the end of a contract. I may have been pushed around, demoted, moved around, put on this anchor job, put on that anchor job, moved around a little bit, but I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I decided I wanted to do when I was 12 years old.
That's wonderful. When you do a show every night, do you get nervous? Or do you just go into it, you're so used to doing it that you don't even think about it?
No, I think about it. I mean, I'm getting ready to do the noon newscast here, and I'll look at that script 3 or 4 times before it airs. I've got producers who are working on it. I will write a little bit on that show. But no, I don't get nervous. I'm only nervous if I feel that I'm not fully prepared. So I always make sure that I'm as prepared as I can be. So I don't think the nervousness comes in. If you're prepared, you're okay. So just make sure you've done all that you need to do to get there. I mean, sometimes it takes me, I did a piece yesterday, it took me 4 hours of preparation to get that story, to shoot it, to write it, I edited it for television, to get all of it ready, and then to make deadline. So once we went on the air, the easiest part of it was going on the air. I'd done all the hard work for the last 4 hours before.
Right. Who's the most difficult person you had to interview as a news journalist?
Oh, God, I don't know that.
George Forbes?
No, George Forbes was easy. You just put the microphone under his chin and he'll talk. You can ask the question and he'll talk. I love George. We get along quite well. I don't know. Sometimes politicians who want to skirt the issue and don't
That's
really
gotta bother you.
don't want to really answer the question. They want to dance around it.
Sure.
I remember interviewing Vice President Dan Quayle. He was the vice president at the time, and I asked him a question, and I said, Mr. Vice President, the mayor of Cleveland, Michael White, says that the Bush administration has not been open to the plights of the cities. How do you respond to that? And he says, well, sir, I don't believe he said that. I said, no, he just told me that 15 minutes ago. Wow. He told me that personally 15. Well, I don't think he said that. But let me say this about what I want to talk about. So that was kind of, wow. So on occasion that happens. But that's not unusual. I mean, many politicians do that. So I don't think it's been difficult to interview people. Once you get people talking, sometimes you just put the microphone, as you're doing right now, right underneath somebody's chin, and they'll talk. And sometimes...
But you have to ask the right questions.
You got to ask the right questions. And if you've done your homework, they know you've done your homework. So
right.
I try to be prepared.
Now, I have a music program as well as interviews. And back in the 60s, my favorite time, what were some of your favorite songs that you used to listen to that you really enjoyed?
I'm a Motown guy. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Ooh Baby Baby, that kind of, I love the Motown sound. Anything from Motown, the Temptations, and the OJs, who were not part of the Motown, but the OJs, who are from the Canton, Greater Cleveland area. I love all of that rock and roll.
I do too.
But I am also a fan of Sinatra and Tony Bennett and saloon singers, that style of music. And also music of the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s.
The big band era.
The big band era. In fact, I usually listen to something every day as I'm getting dressed. Today I was listening, well, she's not an old person singing, but I was listening to Audra McDonald singing one of my favorite songs called Too Late Now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm listening to a lot of that. I love Sinatra stuff. And in fact, I even did a karaoke at a
You did karaoke
at a tavern a couple of years ago, and they said, "Come on, Leon." It was a light night. It was a Wednesday night. I showed up just to have a drink before I went home after doing the 11 o'clock news, and I said, "Well," everybody said, "Come on, don't you want to do something?" It was a handful of people in the place.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I'll do. You got anything from Sinatra?" So we pulled up a Sinatra piece. Well, I knew the piece. And I knew the orchestration, so I didn't even read the words. And I knew the orchestration. I knew when to take the break, how long the break is, and when to come back in on the bridge. So,
What song was it?
it was I think it was either I've Got You Under My Skin or Luck Be a Lady Tonight.
Oh, Luck Be a Lady's my favorite.
Yeah, Luck Be a Lady Tonight. Luck, if you've ever been a lady to begin with, Luck Be a Lady Tonight. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. You know, the Rat Pack. They were the greatest. I mean, when they were together, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, who I think Sammy was the best.
Yeah.
Sammy was my favorite.
Yeah.
Did you like Sammy?
Very, very accomplished. They were all very accomplished. They all brought something special, and I guess that was a different time period when we look at certainly the early 1960s, especially when they were doing their thing on stage and guys in tuxedos and holding drinks on stage or pretending to hold drinks on stage. I mean, we hear of Dean Martin that he was a big drinker. He was not. Dean Martin,
looked like he was.
Yeah, he drank apple juice on stage, is what I'm told. You know, and I can believe it too. But his persona was that he was a big bourbon drinker. But to listen to them put words together and to sing love songs, that's my thing. Love songs of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s.
I totally agree. Leon, where do you want to go from here? Do you want to just ride the wave of success out, or do you want to? Is there anything else in the business that you'd like to do that you haven't done yet?
I guess I've done just about everything. I mean, I've been to the White House a couple of times. Interviewed the president. That's in the White House right there.
Very
interviewed the president. And
now, let me ask you about the president. Was it something that you were a little tentative at first, or was it something very natural like we're doing right now?
Well, it ended up being, you asked me, was I I was a little bit nervous because I'm going into the White House and I'm going to have a one-on-one interview with the president. But I got a phone call from the White House. It came right to that phone right there. And it was the White House saying, would you like to interview the president? It was the White House calling, and we can make him available for you, an exclusive interview for the state of Ohio, and we'll make it a week from today if you can get here and interview the president. And we'll give you, 8 minutes or 10 minutes or so with the president. And I says, of course. I jumped at that, so I gave them my Social Security number and all the stuff that they need for security, which we normally do whenever we cover the president. And then we went there, and he and I did a short interview, and we had a lot of fun with it. I mean, it was mostly about the economy because that's what was going on in 2011. Well, it was pretty much the economy we were talking about, and the bailout of Chrysler and Ford and Wall Street and all those kinds of things. That's what he really wanted to talk about. So we did. But before that, before the camera rolled, he walked in and he says, so you're from Cleveland, right, Mr. Bibb? I says, yes, Mr. President Obama, I'm from Cleveland. And he says, are you guys over that thing of LeBron leaving and going to Miami? That's when he was still in Miami.
Right.
And I said, Mr. President, we're working on getting over that. He says, well, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. But LeBron's going to take the heat. They're going to take him all the way to the championship. And we laughed and joked about that. And then we looked at each other.
Ice.
It broke the ice. And then we looked at each other for about 10 seconds. And we didn't say anything. I looked at him, he looked at me, and we simply smiled. And I guess I was giving him his propers. I was honoring him, being the first black American president of the United States. He knew who I was, I guess, and what I'd done. He had a dossier on me, I suppose. And we just kind of looked at each other, and then we began the interview. And then we talked about it, the economy and all that. And then at the end of it, he got up, he extended his hand, as in that photograph right there, and says, "Thank you for coming. I've enjoyed that." And I says, "Thank you, Mr. President." He says, "I got to go. I have a busy day. I got a lot of things I got to do." I said, "Well, I would imagine." And then as he walked out, he says, "And by the way, you guys will be okay with LeBron. It'll be okay up in Cleveland."
How cool is that?
That's how it ended.
Wow. Is there anybody else that comes close to that, interview-wise, that you were able to speak with? I'm sure you spoke with thousands of people.
Oh, thousands, tens of thousands of people. Of the well-known people, Neil Armstrong, 10 years after the walk on the moon. That would
79?
That would have been in 79.
Yeah.
10 years after the 69 walk on the moon, I went down to Cincinnati and interviewed him in his first major interview. And I asked perhaps the longest question I've ever asked in my life, and got the shortest answer, one of the shortest answers I've ever had, but the answer was packed with emotion, as was the question. And the entire world press did not know what I was getting ready to ask Neil Armstrong. And it was a strange question, and I was hesitant to ask it, because if it wasn't true, the premise of my question was not true, I would have looked foolish. But I said, I'll take a chance. And I asked the question, and he gave the answer.
What was the question?
The question was, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it went just about as long as my paraphrasing will go. I said, "Colonel Armstrong, I don't know if it's true, but I was told, and I don't know who told me, I was told that years after Charles Lindbergh's 1927 transatlantic flight,
Right.
solo in the Spirit of St. Louis, years later, he stayed in the museum of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum and bribed the caretaker of it, the night guard,
Right.
to get him a ladder after it had closed and everybody was gone. And he climbed up, and for the first time in decades, sat in the Spirit of St. Louis, his airplane, for the first time since 1927. I don't know if that's true or not, but what's left of Apollo 11 still hangs next to it from the rafters of the Smithsonian Institution. Would you like to do what I was told Lindbergh did, if indeed he did it, with what's left of Apollo 11?
Good question.
He says, "Sir, I heard the story too. Your story is absolutely right, and yes, I would."
Great story, Leon. That's great.
And the guy who was running the news conference, he kind of said, "Well, I guess this would be a good place to end it right here. So thank you, World Press, for coming here." I kind of capped it, and everybody came to me and says, "Where'd you hear that story?" I says, "I have no idea where I heard it, but I've heard it years ago."
Wow. Wait. See, now it takes somebody that really is well-schooled and has the gift, as you said, to be able to come up with a question like that back in 69.
Yeah, and this was...
Or 79. It was 79.
Yeah, 79 when I asked the question.
It's amazing, and you just did it flawlessly, I'm sure.
Yeah, it went. So that's a memorable moment in my life, because I remember I was nervous. I said, if he says, "I never heard that in my life," I said, "Well, where would I be?"
Right, you'd be kind of lost.
Hanging. Yeah. But I asked it, and it went very well. But many of the people you interview, I mean, they're day-to-day people. It's not just the well-known. They're people I interviewed day to day who give you a wonderful story. You know, one of my first stories in Cleveland, this would have been in 1979. It would have been right after I first joined Channel 3. I got a phone call from a woman who was calling from a convenience store, it was a convenience milk store on the west side of Cleveland. She says, "Leon, I says, yes. Leon Bibb? I says, yes, ma'am, on the phone. She says, I love what you do, and that's why I'm calling you. Do you know that there are children coming in my store buying candy, and they're using $50 bills they said that they found? I says, well, she said, I thought you ought to know that. So we went to the store. And when we got there were kids in there, and they had 50s, and they had $100 bills, and they had 20. I mean, these are children. I mean, like 8, 9, 10 years old. They say, oh, they're tearing down a house over there. And when they hit the house, the money flies out.
It was in the walls.
It's in the walls.
Yeah.
So I went over to the house. I told the little boy, can you take me to it? He says, I got my bicycle. I says, well, put your bike in the truck with me, and we'll drive over there. So the little boy...
Wow.
So the little boy guided us to the house. It was on Ellen Avenue on the west side of Cleveland. And indeed, they were tearing a house down. And the people were digging in the rubble for money. And the people said that the wrecking crew was the first to find the money as they were tearing the house down. And they were putting the money in buckets. Silently almost, walking nonchalantly to their cars, dumping the buckets of money in the trunk of the car, and then go back and get more money. Until the people found out what was going on, and then there was a rush, and then the wrecking crew people got out and ran with the money. So then nobody's got this story but me. It's a world exclusive that I've got. And so I interview people. The one woman has $1,500, and she showed it to me. She pulled it out of her girdle. She had a girdle, and she opened up the side of her girdle and pulled out this wad of $1,500, and I'm rolling on. I mean, we're rolling cameras on all of this, you know. We went on the air live at 6 o'clock. By 6:15, every other television station and newspaper and radio was there. They rushed there. But boy, we got the bulk of the story. The next day I was on the Today Show, the NBC Today Show, doing that story. That was my first network performance. And we did the story for the entire nation. Well, then that later on, that second day, we went back and we began to do research. And we found out that a long time ago, perhaps in the 1930s, during the Depression, there was a man who lived in that house, and it was not a poor neighborhood at that time, as it had since become. And that he did not trust banks, apparently, and hid
during the crash of
29, and hid the money in the walls of the house. Now, while I'm reporting on this, the Secret Service and the Treasury Department send agents because they're seeing if the money is good. Is it stolen? Is it counterfeit?
Right.
And they tell me, Leon, the money is good. It's not stolen. The numbers on it are all good. There's nothing we can do. It's whatever the people do. We're not involved. It's what the Treasury Department told me as we did the story. Well, we found out this man hid the money, and then apparently the man moved away or died, and nobody knew the money was in the house. Now the story is, for the second day story is, how many generations of people, some of them poor, eventually moved into that house and lived in a house where they could have used the money, but the money was buried in the walls all around the bedroom. Had no idea it was there. Now that's a true story. I mean, every word of it is true. That's the stuff of truth is better than fiction.
It is. You can't write that stuff.
Can't write it. But I wrote it that day.
Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, Leon Bibb from TV5. Thank you, Leon. You're the best. You really are. Thank you.
Thank you.